Hi, my name is Kayla Dawson, and I'm an occupational therapy doctoral candidate at Cleveland State University. The focus area for my capstone was program development. So throughout the capstone experience, I created a program guide for the capstone site, PLAAY on the Move, in order to promote community participation in children with sensory and mobility impairments. Overall, there's a great need to address community participation in children with sensory and mobility impairments. And community participation includes social interactions and engagement in community level activities, such as activities that take place in school, in the neighborhood, in the workplace, in social groups, and more. Research shows that children who participate within the community demonstrate improved quality of life, health, wellness, social skills, confidence, and overall development. However, children with mobility and sensory impairments experience barriers that their same age peers do not, which limits their participation within the community. There's a gap in addressing community participation, specifically in children with sensory and mobility impairments within occupational therapy practice. These restrictions in the environment are greatly caused by physical, sensory, and social environmental barriers, which is an area of practice occupational therapy practitioners can address. And by addressing these barriers, OTs can improve community participation in children with sensory and mobility impairments. So, the overall goal of this capstone experience was to develop three community based events to increase community participation in children with sensory and mobility impairments. A majority of the capstone experience was spent planning and hosting three events with PLAAY on the Move at the Great Lakes Science Center and Cleveland Metro Park Zoo. The main deliverable for this capstone was the program guide created to promote community participation in children with sensory and mobility impairments, and this was created for PLAAY on the Move so that the organization can easily recreate the events in the future. To supplement the program guide, two social stories and one caregiver handout was created. The social stories were made to prepare participating children for the events at the Great Lakes Science Center and Cleveland Metro Park Zoo. The caregiver handout included education and resources for caregiver respite, which was given during the events. And during the events, to address environmental barriers and accessibility concerns, PLAAY on the Move utilizes multi-directional overground harness systems and modified ride-on cars. These assistive devices promote hands-free play, independence, a sense of control, and overall support. The assistive equipment also decreased the restrictions of the environment and social barriers that were experienced with other children, since they were able to play in areas that they might typically not be able to. To address the needs of children with sensory impairments, social stories and sensory rooms were utilized. The social stories were used to prepare the participating children for specific situations and sensory experiences during the events. And the sensory rooms provided sensory equipment to help children relax, de-stress, and focus. So volunteers were available throughout the events to provide physical support and encourage the children to take sensory breaks as necessary. And volunteers provided support to the children during the events to encourage parents to take a break and relax. So the primary outcome of this capstone was the increase in community participation, social interaction, and engagement in play activities in children with sensory and mobility impairments during these events. Participating children were less restricted by their physical environments because of the assistive equipment and support available. Due to these supports, children with mobility impairments were able to play in areas they normally would have had difficulty with. Community sites such as the zoo and science center are typically crowded and loud areas, which creates challenges for children with sensory sensitivities, but the participating children were also less restricted by sensory challenges during the events because of the sensory equipment and accommodations available. Overall, the capstone was successful in promoting community participation in children with mobility and sensory impairments. However, there are some next steps for occupational therapy practitioners and future capstone students to take to improve upon these events, including more education on sensory sensitivities, more sensory-based activities during the events, creating relationships with more community sites, and furthering respite opportunities for caregivers. By utilizing assistive equipment, education, advocacy, compensatory techniques, and community organizations, this capstone provided a successful opportunity for children with mobility and sensory impairments to participate within the community with same age peers. Thank you for listening.